morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the very first Global Forest Summit that is co-organized by Reforest'Action and the Open Diplomacy Institute, and that is under the high patronage of Mr. Emmanuel Macron, President of the French Republic. I am here with Stéphane Hallaire, President and founder of Reforest'Action. Good morning.
Good morning, Thomas.
Thank you for co-organizing this event with the Institute. As I told, it's a civil society-led initiative that is grasping our sense of emergency with our sense of responsibility. It's an independent approach that is meant to bring together all leaders that can make a strong change for forests, to protect them better and to restore them faster. To start this Global Forest Summit, we have the high pleasure to host Lord Zac Goldsmith, Minister of the Pacific and the Environment in the UK government. Hello, Lord Goldsmith.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. The whole day will discuss many rounds of issues. It's about health, it's about biodiversity, it's about climate, it's about our economy. And to start with this summit that we are very proud to lead with Stéphane, I'd like to turn to you, Lord Goldsmith, to speak about the climate aspects of the forest issue. Between 2004 and 2017, 43 million hectares were deforested. It's the size of Morocco, it's the size of California, it's a strong climate issue. The problem is getting bigger and bigger, as UNEP plans that more than 100 million hectares of forests are at immediate risks. And we can't talk about this without thinking of the COP26 in Glasgow ahead of us, of course. The UN already alerts the international community about the risk of a global disaster. Despite the fact that the hope is rising again since the US are back at the table. John Kerry was in Paris yesterday. He is going all through Europe to say, I apologize for the US being absent from the Paris Climate Agreement. The UK chairs the COP26 as well as the G7, and so you have a role in steering the international community towards a bigger and bolder ambition for forest protection and restoration in the case of climate. What are you doing on that front, Lord Zac Goldsmith?
First of all, the situation, or the figures, are awful. We're losing around, it's estimated, 30 football pitches worth of forest every single minute. So you can do the maths. I've been talking to you for about half an hour. And it's a vast amount of forest will be destroyed during that time. We know that the ocean health and abundance is being extinguished, that the land's biodiversity is being depleted at an extraordinary rate. Million species which are facing extinction, including 2 out of every 5 plants. And of course, we're destabilizing the very climate that makes life possible. If these trends continue, we know that all of us at some point are going to pay a terrible price. Already the impacts are being felt. We know that, on the whole, as a rule, it's the poorest people in the world who are hit first and who are hit hardest when the free services that nature provides are undermined. 1 billion people depend on forests for their livelihoods. Just as 1 billion people depend on fish as the main source of protein. So at the same time as this, we're creating this other species, suddenly more real and against the backdrop of COVID. We're creating ideal conditions for zoonosis, both in the way we raise animals and because erosion of ecosystems, cutting down forests, dislodges pathogens. And the link between environmental degradation and emergence of zoonotic pathogens is very clear. Hendra in Australia, Ebola virus, Zika, yellow fever, dengue, SARS, MERS, and I could go on, COVID itself. The link is there. But most alarming of all is the impact on climate change, which is really essential, as you know, for life on Earth. So turning this trajectory around is without a doubt the most important challenge that we face as a species. And we need to be honest that no matter how clever we are, technology, low carbon technology alone is not going to save us. So, of course, governments should do what they can to stimulate the clean technology revolution, but we need to recognize that there is a market for that already. We can accelerate it, but it's there. Even if you take politicians out of the equation, that is not true of nature. If you consider the Amazon, the whole world depends on it, but its value barely registers. The financial incentives that destroy forests outweigh those that
Lord Goldsmith, you're specifically running the Fact Dialogue Initiative to bring together as much political energy as possible for forest protection and restoration for the sake of climate. Could you tell us a bit more about this specific initiative towards COP26?
Yes, apologies for the preamble, but as COP presidents, we believe that about a third of the solution to climate change can be delivered by nature-based solutions, so forests, mangroves, and so on. And therefore, as COP presidents, we've put nature at the heart of our ambitions. And there are three strands to that. We want ambitious targets. I won't talk about that now, because that's probably for another discussion. We want more finance for nature. That's also another discussion. But the key part, which relates to your question, is we want to create coalitions of ambitious countries committed to tackling the drivers of deforestation. And one of the key drivers is commodity reduction. 70% of the world's deforestation is caused by commodity reduction. And as you know, deforestation itself is a major contributor to climate change. So we need to bring the link between commodity reduction and deforestation. So in the UK, we brought in legislation to require companies, businesses that import commodities to prove that they're not bringing commodities in that were grown on illegally cleared land. And the Fact Dialogue that you just asked about is an attempt to create a global coalition around that same agenda. And it involves producer countries, consumer countries, north, south, east, west, rich, poor, forested countries, and non-forested countries.
I'd like to take it from here, because you speak about high ambition, but a very humble approach, since human intelligence and technology will never ever be as clever as nature. This is also something you fight for, Stéphane, right?
Oh yes, we do, because as Lord Goldsmith has highlighted, deforestation is the first issue we have to address when we talk about forest, obviously. And it's good to hear that governments are tackling this subject. I also think it's a civil society subject, and it has to come from everybody, I guess, because yes, deforestation is due to commodity, to agriculture, to the way we live, to the way we rely on forest to provide all the services we expect from them. I don't know if it's right or not to expect anything from forest, but they deliver services to us. So I think it's a government topic, but it's also a civil society topic.
Yeah, that is something important in the design of this Global Forest Summit, is that the climate challenge is so big that we sometimes feel very anxious about the sense of emergency, and we even forget about it, and you've decided as a civil society leader, a big corp leader, to fight for forests, and first by reforestation. But you've said that first is about conservation, protection of forests. You're leading a crowd planting company. This is very curious that it's a company and a think tank that bring together these international leaders today in a multi-stakeholder coalition. What do you expect to achieve with this approach?
Well, what I want to achieve depends very much on the way I consider forests and on where we are with forest. If you consider forest as a source of services, you will have a different approach if you believe that you belong to the forest, if you feel like you're part of it, right? And as far as I'm concerned, every time I make a decision about what do I need to do to restore or to protect forest, I consider forest being in the room, and it can hear me, it's with us, and therefore everything we do will serve the forest first, as opposed to serve myself using the forest. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, Lord Goldsmith highlighted that deforestation is so big that we need to address this point first, but also we've degraded 75% of our land during our last decades. So with these two figures in mind, what I want to achieve, and with the way I look at forest, is, I come from the UN figures. They talk about these 10 million hectares being deforested every single year, and 75% of land degraded. Now, they say that we need to restore 1 billion hectares before 2050 if we want to contribute to the 1.5 degrees Celsius target that was defined in Paris in 2015 at the COP21. But 1 billion hectares of forest being restored, it's a huge number. It's 1 trillion trees approximately, if we put that in trees. So how do we achieve that? The positive look at it is 1 billion hectares is a finite number. And if it's a finite number, it's possible to do that, right? Now the challenge is, if we want to act on the ground very concretely, well, we can have big projects in big forests like Amazonia, but in average, in the world, forests are a bit more than 400 hectares big. So you need millions of projects to restore these 1 billion hectares of forest across the world. Now, nobody can do that on his own, millions of projects, and within the next few years. So the approach, and what I want to achieve, is to take part of multi-stakeholders coalitions that together will deliver that. And these multi-stakeholders coalition, they gather local people, because it has to come from the civil society, I strongly believe that, but also governments to provide the support that local people need. And we need reforestation entrepreneurs. We need them, people who will run the project on the field. And for me, and it's a long answer to your short question, but what I want to achieve is to help creating this generation of reforestation entrepreneurs, to provide them technical support on how to run the project, but also to monitor the project. So we can learn from mistakes, we can share best practices, and we can, provide them the funds they need to run their project. So my role is to do that, is to provide them technical support, to monitor the project, and to collect funds so they can run their project.
You're one of the first forest entrepreneurs, and that's thought leadership embodied in Stéphane. But I'd like to ask Lord Goldsmith, what Stéphane says is about impact. It's about the way we can achieve this 1,000 billion trees, 1 trillion trees approach to restore ecosystems as we enter the UN Decade on Ecosystems Restoration, and to achieve the goals of climate protection as well as biodiversity. Do you feel that there is such a sort of reforestation, forest protection entrepreneurs in the UK? It's often said that the Y generation, which I belong to, look for meaningful jobs. Isn't that a meaningful job?
Completely right. I have no doubt that the appetite is there. If you can't deliver without finance, it always seems to come back to finance. So a big part of our campaign is to raise finance for nature. We in the UK, we've committed to spend about almost a third of our international climate finance on nature-based solutions like forests. We're encouraging other countries. France has made the same sort of commitment, and we're hoping for commitments of the same sort that range from other major donor countries. But even if everyone does this, it's not going to be enough. We need private finance as well, and that's where we need functioning, high-integrity carbon markets. But we also need to make better use of money that is already there. So when you talk to scientists and ask how much is it going to cost to turn around the destruction of nature, the number they always seem to come up with, I'm not sure why, but they come up with a number of $700 billion a year, which is terrifying. But actually $700 billion a year, by coincidence, is exactly the same amount of money spent every year by the top 50 food-producing countries, subsidizing often destructive land use. So if we can get countries to commit to identify those perverse subsidies and then begin to shift those subsidies to be supportive rather than undermining of nature, that's your solution right there. So it's not as big a challenge as I think sometimes we allow ourselves to believe. All that's missing really is political will. This issue of businesses do as well. I believe, sorry, make one last point, I believe that it is essential that just as more and more businesses are becoming, or mapping out plans to become net zero, we need companies all around the world to commit to being nature positive, to aligning nature with the way they do business. It's at the very early stages. We need to get to a point where the whole system is nature positive.
Yeah.
But we can do it, in my view, and I'm absolutely certain.
what I wanted to say is that it's music to my ears. You speak about stopping subsidies that fuel deforestation. It's one of the key recommendations that the Y7, which is the Future Generations Group of the G7 that the UK chairs this year, has passed in 2019. And I do hope, as for forests and as for subsidies too, I do hope that the UK, which chairs the G7 this year and co-chairs the COP27, the COP26 with Italy that chairs the G20 itself, will listen to these recommendations from groups of future generations from the Y7 and the Y20. But I'd like to get from the climate aspect to the biodiversity aspect. We usually say the whole environmental crisis, it's a twin crisis between climate and biodiversity. And indeed, 1 million species are now at risks, very immediate extinction according to the UN and WWF. Therefore, mass deforestation in developing countries is a key driver in terrestrial mass biodiversity loss. Indeed, it's a twin crisis, as I said, as human footprint on Earth has made a disaster. This depends, you pointed out earlier, but I'd like to zoom on this one. This depends on our agriculture consumption and the way we import commodities. What can be done to balance agriculture with protection of forests and nature as a whole, but forests specifically, as they cover 80% of Earth's terrestrial species?
Yeah, I mean, the irony is that over the last 40 years we've trebled food production, which is miraculous if you think about it, in a very short period of time from an evolutionary point of view. But the cost of doing that has been absolutely colossal. We've all been swapping examples of what's happening to the natural world, but we know that which figures look at, it's devastating in terms of biodiversity, ecosystems, water systems, forests, and so on. But it's also dangerous for our food security. So the methods that have been used to generate that food increase, that increased productivity, have been almost entirely short-term, smash and grab. And today, that destructive land use is causing declining yields for around 500 million small farms. So today, around 1 billion people are dealing with hunger in one way or another. That number is going to grow unless we find a way of aligning agriculture with nature. So it's not a question of should or how, we simply have to do that. And that's a big part, therefore, of our campaign as presidents of COP. And I mentioned subsidies, that's a key part of it. It's a huge part of it. I mentioned commodities as well, that's a huge part of it. In the UK, we have public procurement policies that have a bias in favour of legal and sustainable timber and sustainable palm oil. We need that to become mainstream as well. We're introducing this new law, as I mentioned, requiring businesses to prove that they're not importing illegal deforestation. We need more and more countries. The UK is a big economy, but we're not a big enough economy to flip the market on our own. We need a coalition of countries and regions committed to doing the same. So we're hearing good news from Europe that we think that something very radical and ambitious is going to be introduced. We're hearing the same from China. China, the biggest importer of commodities of all. If that happens, we have the potential then to flip the market. So for the first time since the Industrial Revolution, forests will be worth more alive than dead. So it is beginning to happen, and that's what our fact dialogue is about. By the way, we know, this is not hypothetical, we know what can be done. The Tropical Forest Alliance, the African Palm Oil Initiative, the Cocoa and Forest Initiative, all of these involve companies, civil society, governments, working to break that link between, as you said, commodity production or agriculture and deforestation. So West Africa lost 2.3 million hectares of forest to cocoa plantations in just 20 years, causing terrible soil degradation, water insecurity, crop failures. But action by Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, focused on deforestation-free cocoa, has halved the loss, halved the rate of loss in just 1 year, 2018 to 2019. So we know what can be done. Our job is to try and scale that up. And again, business, civil society, and governments working together. And we have the kernel, the seed of what needs to happen. We absolutely need to grow it.
You've mentioned a few countries. Reforest'Action is acting on the ground in 30 different countries. For reforestation, I mean restoring forests. Could you tell us a bit more, Stéphane, one or two examples of a program that you've run that have brought results for biodiversity? Because that's the issue I was raising.
Yeah, we've got projects in 30 countries all over Europe, but also South America, North America, Africa, and Asia. And we've got projects in Côte d'Ivoire where we do agroforestry, for instance, where we reintroduce other type of trees in cocoa productions. So we've got an ecosystem and not a monoculture of cocoa. I think this is a key thing. But what I would like to highlight is there are many 4 best practices when you restore degraded land and where there is conflict between agriculture and forest maybe, is that first of all, every time you act on the land, it has to be local people driven. It's not a subject that you can push from the top. I don't believe so, because otherwise you may have conflicts with local populations and they need to live as we do. So,
and today we will receive many indigenous leaders that will acknowledge this fact and speak about this.
Yeah, we wanted to give them a voice, you know, an occasion to share this point, because they are at the center of the subject. I strongly believe that. The other aspect is we need diverse forest. We need diverse ecosystems and avoiding monoculture as much as we can, because diversity in forest will increase biodiversity as years pass by, but also diverse forests are more resilient to climate change, and therefore they will last longer, they will be more adapted to climate change. And we need as well to have projects on the ground that have a business model for the local people. They need to produce income for these guys, because otherwise the trees will not last. I mean, it's cool to act for the environment, but if you don't have what you need to live on a daily basis, it's pointless, right? It's not your subject. So,
that is something we will discuss also today. The sustainability of reforestation, forest protection, forest restoration. At the end of the day, the 6th session is specifically about this.
And the next session, actually, the session 2, will introduce the notion of bioeconomy and circular bioeconomy, because we need business model for local people, but a business model based on nature, not on petroleum, right? And I take this opportunity to announce that Reforest'Action has joined the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance, initiated by His Royal Highness Prince of Wales. This Circular Bioeconomy Alliance will be presented by Mark Palahi in the next session.
Indeed.
Finally, the best practice we need to put in place is, or we put in place for successful projects and to increase biodiversity, is monitoring. Monitoring the projects on the long run. What's the point of planting trees if they don't grow? They will never deliver anything we expect from them. They will never be a forest. So monitoring will help us, as I said, sharing experience and best practices and having this generation of reforestation entrepreneurs who will see the results and will want to replicate them.
I'm sure that this resonates a lot to the audience we have, as the more 3,000 people from all over the world who joined us. Some of them are certainly already reforestation or forest entrepreneurs, and some may become so. So that's why I'd like to follow up with you, Lord Goldsmith. We've brought together academia, NGO leadership, associations, grassroots movements, indigenous communities, governments, international organizations, transnational firms, and SMEs to talk about this importance of a stronger protection of forest and a faster restoration of forest. Do you have a specific call to action to the community that joined today the Global Forest Summit?
Thank you so much. That is a huge and very important question. And I think the answer slightly depends on the one's talking to. So, for example, any self-respecting business today needs to have a plan to achieve net zero. And that's beginning to happen. But we need the same effort for nature. The whole economy ultimately needs to be in line with nature. We want businesses to declare to become nature positive. We need this critical mass of businesses to do that. By the way, it's worth noting. History, the World Economic environmental risk at the top 5 places in its global risk. We hear the same story told over and over again. So we're seeing businesses moving towards net zero, and it's impressive. The race to zero is growing very fast. We're not seeing as much as we need to in relation to nature positive portfolios. So businesses, their shareholders, people need to apply as much pressure as possible to ensure that happens. The second thing is collectively requires coalitions. We need to tackle illegality. And it sounds like an obvious thing to say, but more than half of the world's deforestation is illegal. And we know that when countries are committed, we know that action can be taken. We've seen, for example, that there are times when the Brazilian government has become serious about stopping illegal deforestation. They've managed to do so. Other countries have as well. So we need them to maintain that seriousness. So half of deforestation is illegal. We can deal with that. Illegality fuels corruption, destabilizes society. I'm told that it results in £23 billion a year being lost in terms of lost revenue. So we've got to deal with illegality. And if there's one thing that we do collectively, it is to foster that shift in relation to subsidies. It's the point you've made, that's the point that we've all made at one point or another in this discussion. But it really is a solution on a plate. It's gigantic, it's significant. If we can foster a global commitment to shift the way we use public money to incentivize land use, we've got a solution right now. So that is, I can answer your question. We are absolutely making that essential part of it.
I do hope that as the UK chairs the G7 this year, you would achieve this, and I'm sure that the US being back at the table of the G7 with a serious approach to it, it's likely happens. But I'd like to stress one point you've made, a strong difference between net zero ambition and nature positive ambition. That is something new we hear, and we don't hear it universally. Could you tell us more about this new vision of a nature positive approach?
The problem with climate change, one of the problems, is that it has dominated the debate sometimes to the exclusion of the natural world.
Yeah.
But as you said in one of your questions, you can't separate the two. The climate change is, in a sense, the fever that the natural world is experiencing as a consequence of years of abuse at our hands. So we have to deal with the natural world. And yet, it's so much of what we do to tackle climate change. It's about technology, it's about efficiency, it's about waste, all important. But unless we deal with nature, we don't solve the problem. There is no pathway to net zero without nature.
Does this mean that
I'm going to answer it so very quickly. What it means is businesses looking at their entire supply chains and identifying environmental risk. Where are they exposed? Where is that footprint bigger than it should be? And then to take measures to reduce it. And the good news is there's nothing that needs to be done that isn't already being done by someone somewhere.
Yeah.
The question is the challenge is to bring it all under one umbrella.
Does this mean, because that's a very important question, does this mean that we need to look beyond carbon compensation? That was the set of mind that has been around us since the Kyoto Protocol. That was we emit and then we offset. Is this natural positive approach getting way beyond this?
Yeah, absolutely right. You can't just see trees and forests as mechanisms for absorbing carbon. Otherwise, when it comes to planting them, you end up planting the wrong trees in the wrong places. Trees are so much more than carbon. Trees manage water flow. They reduce the risk of flooding in the winter. They hold water for longer in the ground during the summer. They are the harbingers of the home for 80% of the world's terrestrial biodiversity. People depend on the services forests provide. A billion people still. Just like a carbon, you end up with a perverse outcome. You absolutely have to take a more holistic and broader view. Otherwise, you end up with the wrong solution.
Yeah.
And one of my jobs in government is to deliver the tree program here in the UK. And I'm absolutely determined that when we spend public money, we don't just look at carbon. We look at all the different benefits. And that way, I think we'll get the most value for money from our investment.
I think that was an important point to be made today. It's not about using forests as absorber of our CO2 emissions. It's bigger and bigger than this. Stéphane, you can also address our audience from all over the globe, and we thank them for being there early morning, late night, middle afternoon. What is the call to action you'd like to address them?
Yeah, the first one would be to share what Lord Goldsmith mentioned, that forests are at the center of our lives. They capture CO2, yes, but they reinforce biodiversity, they provide the food we eat, they provide the water we drink, they retain the soil, they filter water, they create beautiful landscapes, they are the center of our lives. We need to share that because we need to raise people's awareness that forests are key on a daily basis. Every single day you need to take care about forests. That's the first call to action.
I'm sure that the people who join us today are already aligned with this awareness. What can they do more with the call to action?
They can protect the forest very in concrete manner. If you run a business, turn to nature positiveness, turn to bioeconomy. And the other thing you can do is join this reforestation generation, these reforestation entrepreneurs. We need to grow the number of people who will deliver the projects on the ground. And if you cannot run a project yourself, why don't you support projects that are delivered by others? We need everybody's commitment on this. Lord Goldsmith mentioned that everything goes back to money at the end of the day, because we know how to deliver. We've got the best practices, don't we? We've got the coalitions, we've got the right means, but we lack
got the money.
No, we don't have enough money. We start having more money, but we're far from it. So this is a key driver, help us creating this generation of reforestation entrepreneurs.
We will also get to this entrepreneurship and financial aspects in our session on the way we design an economy that sustain the goal of forest protection and restoration. That is the end of our session. I'd like very much to thank Lord Goldsmith for being with us this morning. Good luck for the preparation of the COP26 climate in Glasgow. Good luck also to articulate its job with the COP15 coming on biodiversity. And good luck to use the G7 leadership to steer the global community towards these goals. We will be back at the Global Forest Summit in a very few minutes to speak about this political momentum and economic momentum and social momentum that gets around forest. Let's meet back and resume our conversation at 9:30 on YouTube.